The galaxy had always been under the oppressive grip of the Galactic Empire. With its vast fleets and overwhelming military power, the Empire stretched across countless systems, bending planets and species to its will. No one had ever dared to challenge the Empire's authority. It seemed as if nothing could stop them, not even the strongest of rebellions. But in the farthest corner of the galaxy, something was changing. Something the Empire was not prepared for. The Empire had just crushed a rebellion on the planet Zora. Its military forces stood proud, overlooking the ashes of yet another world they had conquered. Emperor Kaldar, the ruthless ruler of the Galactic Empire, sat in his palace, watching the celebration unfold. His fleet was powerful and his rule was absolute. He had crushed every attempt to challenge him for years. The galaxy was his, and no one dared defy him. But in the depths of space, a different story was unfolding. On Earth, humanity had spent years preparing in silence. They had not joined the Empire's wars nor sought its attention. They lived in isolation, watching the galaxy spiral into chaos. But something was stirring inside their hearts. The human race was not content to sit back and watch the galaxy burn. They had decided to act, and they were preparing for the day when the Empire would learn just how wrong they had been to overlook humanity. Commander John Morgan was humanity's greatest military mind. Once a soldier, now the commander of Earth's first interstellar fleet, Morgan had spent years quietly assembling a fleet unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The fleet was hidden in the farthest reaches of space, far beyond the reach of the Empire's sensors. The humans had perfected technologies that even the Empire had never seen, and now they were ready. The commander's eyes burned with determination as he sat in his command center, overlooking the final preparations for what was to come. He knew the Empire would not take them seriously. After all, humanity was just a small species on a distant planet. But Morgan had learned one thing: never underestimate a human's resolve. They had survived on Earth for centuries, and they would survive in the galaxy. "Commander?" A voice broke through the silence. It was Lieutenant Harper, his most trusted officer. "Status report," Morgan said, his voice calm yet firm. "All systems are ready, sir," Harper replied. "We are cloaked and awaiting orders. The fleet is in position." Morgan nodded. He had always known this day would come. The day when humanity would show the galaxy that they were not just a species to be ignored. The day the Empire would realize that they had made a grave mistake. From a distance, the fleet was massive. Hundreds of ships, from sleek, cutting-edge warships to massive, heavily armored battleships, all powered by advanced human technologies. Their weapons were unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. The humans had invested years into perfecting their technology, and now it was time to show the galaxy what they could do. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Empire's military leadership was growing complacent. They believed that nothing could stand in their way. No one could challenge their power. After all, the galaxy had been theirs for centuries. The Emperor had crushed every rebellion, crushed every opponent who had dared to stand against him. What made humanity any different? But their arrogance would soon be their downfall. In the Empire's command center, Admiral Zarek, one of the most experienced officers in the fleet, was reviewing the latest intelligence reports. He looked at the data with skepticism. There had been reports of strange energy readings near the galactic border, but it wasn't enough to concern him. The Empire's fleet was vast and no one could hide from their sensors. "Admiral, we have a problem," a subordinate reported, his voice tense. Zarek raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "We've detected an anomaly, sir. Something cloaked in deep space. It's large, but it's hard to pinpoint. Could be a glitch in the system, but it's worth investigating." The Admiral scoffed. "Another false alarm. The Empire's sensors have swept this region 100 times over. There's nothing out there." But even as Zarek dismissed the report, something nagged at him, something he couldn't shake off. The strange readings from the far corner of the galaxy seemed more than just a glitch. Something was out there and it was getting closer. "Prepare a reconnaissance ship," Zarek said finally. Send them to investigate. But I want this handled quickly. We don't have time for wild goose chases. As the reconnaissance ship sped toward the coordinates of the strange readings, the Empire continued its routine of unchallenged dominance. But in the deep shadows of space, the human fleet was ready. Morgan watched as the first wave of ships powered up, their engines humming with anticipation. Every officer on the bridge was silent, each one knowing what was at stake. The fleet would not fail. "Prepare for launch," Morgan ordered. "Yes, sir," Harper responded. "All ships are ready, Commander. We are cloaked and waiting for the signal." The fleet would strike at the heart of the Empire when they least expected it. They would show the Empire the cost of their arrogance, and they would take back what was rightfully theirs, their freedom. Meanwhile, the reconnaissance ship sent by the Empire was closing in on the anomaly. The crew had no idea what awaited them. As they neared the location, the sensors on their ship began to beep wildly, alerting them to the presence of an enormous force, one they could never have prepared for. Before the Empire could even react, the human fleet emerged from their cloaking devices, revealing their full strength. The time for silence was over. Humanity was here, and they were not just another group of rebels. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Commander, the fleet it's massive," the officer on the reconnaissance ship stammered into his communicator. "We've never seen anything like this. It's humanity." Morgan's voice crackled through the comms. "This is Commander John Morgan of the United Earth Fleet. We've come to free the galaxy from your tyranny. Prepare yourselves." And with that, the battle began. The Empire had no idea what they were up against. The mighty Empire had underestimated humanity, and now it was too late. This marks the opening chapter of your story, setting the stage for the upcoming battles, tension, and the grand reveal of humanity's strength. It's written in simple, straightforward language, avoiding any complex vocabulary while remaining engaging and violation-free. Oodao Mini. The sudden appearance of humanity's fleet stunned the Empire. Commander Morgan's forces had emerged from deep space like a storm, their ships gliding silently, each one a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of humanity. They had come, for one reason, to bring the Empire to its knees. Across the galaxy, news of the surprise attack spread like wildfire. Planets under the Empire's control, already weary from years of oppression, looked on in shock. Some saw it as a glimmer of hope, while others wondered if humanity's bold move would lead to their own destruction. Back in the Empire's central command station, Admiral Zarek stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. He had never anticipated such a direct challenge. The readings from the reconnaissance ship had been vague, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming size and strength of the human fleet. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The Empire's military might, which had been untouchable for so long, was suddenly questioned. "How is this possible?" Zarek muttered, his hand clenched around the armrest of his chair. The lights of the command center flickered as the tension grew. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the reconnaissance ship." Their last transmission reported an overwhelming fleet of human warships, over 200 ships, all heavily armed, the officer at his side reported, anxiety evident in his voice. Zarek took a deep breath. "Send the message to the Emperor. Tell him we need reinforcements. Now." The human fleet prepares on the other side. Commander Morgan stood on the bridge of the flagship Terra Nova, overseeing the fleet's movements. His gaze was focused on the screen, where the Empire's military was, beginning to respond. Their ships were beginning to assemble in an attempt to counter the human onslaught. "We've got their attention," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice steady but full of excitement. "They're scrambling to organize their fleet, but it'll take them time to assemble." Morgan nodded. "We don't have time. We need to strike fast and decisively. We'll split the fleet into 3 groups. The first group will target their supply lines. The second group will engage their flagship, the Emperor's Wrath. The third group will provide support and keep their reinforcements from arriving." The crew moved with purpose, each officer knowing their role. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight to show the galaxy that humanity had the strength to protect its future. We'll take down the Emperor's wrath, Morgan said, his voice calm but resolute. It's their flagship. If we destroy it, they'll lose command and fall into chaos. The first strike, the human fleet moved into position. The Empire's ships, massive dreadnoughts and heavily armored vessels began to line up, ready for battle. But despite their impressive size, the Empire's forces were slow to react, still reeling from the shock of humanity's appearance. The human fleet, on the other hand, moved with precision, coordinated and swift. First group, prepare to engage, Morgan ordered. The ships in the first group split off, heading toward the Empire's supply lines. They would disrupt the Empire's logistics and prevent them from gaining any advantage. The Terra Nova and its accompanying ships stayed on course, headed for the heart of the Empire's fleet. As the human ships moved closer to the Empire's defenses, the first round of fire began. A barrage of plasma bolts streaked across space, impacting the shields of the Empire's vessels. The human fleet's superior maneuverability allowed them to avoid most of the initial blasts, while their weapons tore through the Empire's ships with ease. On board the Emperor's Wrath, Admiral Zarek watched as his forces were hit by devastating firepower. The ship's shields flickered and sparked under the intensity of the human assault. "Return fire, all weapons, engage!" Zarek shouted, trying to rally his men. But the Empire's response was slow. Their ships, massive and cumbersome, struggled to keep up with the agile human vessels. Humanity's ships were faster, more responsive, and far better equipped with advanced technologies. The Empire's once invincible fleet was being torn apart, piece by piece. A battle of wits. Despite the destruction unfolding in space, Admiral Zarek refused to surrender. His mind raced as he analyzed the situation. The humans had clearly prepared for this moment, but he had one advantage: the Emperor's Wrath, the powerful flagship that could turn the tide of battle with its advanced weaponry. Zarek knew that as long as the flagship stood, the Empire had a chance. "We need to counterattack," Zarek muttered to himself. "Divert all power to the main cannons. We'll show them that the Empire is not so easily defeated." The Emperor's Wrath unleashed a powerful wave of energy from its main cannon, aiming directly at the Terra Nova. The shot was massive, a concentrated burst of energy that could obliterate an entire fleet. But Morgan had anticipated this move. "Brace for impact," Morgan shouted as the ship's crew scrambled to prepare. The shields on the Terra Nova flickered as the blast slammed into them, sending a shockwave throughout the ship. But the shields held, and the ship barely rocked under the impact. The Empire's flagship had just thrown everything it had at the human vessel, and it had failed. "Return fire. Target their main cannon," Morgan commanded. The human fleet unleashed a devastating volley of their own, aimed directly at the Emperor's Wrath. The shots struck with pinpoint accuracy, overwhelming the flagship's defenses. The massive ship groaned under the impact, its hull starting to crack, Empire's growing desperation. The battle raged on, with the human fleet systematically dismantling the Empire's forces. The Empire's ships were falling one by one, their once mighty fleet crumbling under the weight of humanity's precision strikes. On the command deck of the Emperor's Wrath, Admiral Zarek was frantic. His ship was taking heavy damage, and the Empire's forces were being pushed back. He could feel the power of the human fleet surging through space, an unstoppable force. "Where are our reinforcements?" Zarek demanded. "We need more ships. We cannot lose this battle." But the reinforcements were slow to arrive. The Empire had underestimated the humans, thinking they could handle the situation with their overwhelming numbers alone. Now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The tide turns as the battle wore on. The human fleet continued to press their advantage. The Emperor's Wrath was now heavily damaged, its systems failing. Zarek knew that the flagship would soon be lost. "Admiral, the fleet is collapsing," an officer shouted. "The human ships are unstoppable." Zarek turned to the officer, his face pale. "Get the Emperor on the line. We need a new plan. Now." The battle raged on as the human fleet continued to press their advantage. The Empire, once so confident in its dominance, was now fighting for survival. The Emperor's Wrath had been crippled, and its once formidable defenses were barely holding. Together, the human fleet, on the other hand, moved with precision, overwhelming the Empire's forces at every turn. In the heart of the human fleet, Commander Morgan stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching the battle unfold. His mind was sharp, calculating every move, every shot. He knew this was the moment that would define humanity's future. The Empire's defeat was within their grasp, but they could not afford to falter now. "Lieutenant Harper," Morgan called, his voice calm but commanding. "Update on the battle status." Harper, standing at her console, quickly scanned the information. "We've taken down at least half of their fleet, Commander. The Empire's ships are retreating, but they've formed a defensive perimeter around their flagship. We're in position to finish this." Morgan nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant Emperor's Wrath. "Good. Set course for the flagship. It's time to end this." Empire's last stand Admiral Zarek, aboard the Emperor's Wrath, paced nervously in his command center. The once proud Empire was crumbling around him, and he knew that this was their final chance to turn the tide. The reinforcements they had called for were still light years away, and the enemy fleet was closing in on them. "Admiral," an officer called, "we've lost contact with several of our ships. The human fleet has broken through our defenses. We can't hold out much longer." Zarek's face was pale, but his resolve remained unbroken. He knew the situation was dire, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. The Emperor was counting on him, and he couldn't let humanity's fleet destroy everything they had built. "Prepare to engage all remaining weapons. We fight until the end," Zarek ordered, his voice firm despite the chaos around him. "The humans may have the upper hand, but we still have the strength to destroy them. We will not go down without a fight." But deep down, Zarek knew that the battle was slipping out of his control. The human fleet, with its superior technology and tactical genius, was unstoppable. They had underestimated humanity, and now the consequences of that mistake were clear. Humanity's final push on the Terra Nova, Commander Morgan prepared to make the final strike. His fleet had already decimated the Empire's forces, and now, only the Emperor's Wrath remained. It was a massive, heavily armed ship, but even it couldn't withstand the relentless assault of humanity's fleet. "All ships, prepare to engage the flagship," Morgan said, his voice steady as he addressed his crew. "This is the final push. We finish this now. For Earth. For the galaxy." The crew responded with a chorus of affirmations as the fleet moved into position. Their ships formed a tight formation, each one acting in perfect harmony, targeting the Emperor's Wrath with laser-like precision. The time for hesitation had passed. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. As the Terra Nova approached the flagship, Morgan's mind raced. He knew that this battle would not only determine the fate of the Empire, but the future of the entire galaxy. If humanity succeeded today, they would prove that even the mightiest empire could be toppled by determination, strategy, and sheer will. The battle for the flagship. The Emperor's Wrath loomed ahead, a dark giant in the void of space. The flagship unleashed its final barrage of energy blasts, trying to break through the human fleet's formation. The massive energy beams streaked across space, but the human ships were too quick, evading the attacks with ease. Morgan watched as his fleet moved into position, ready to deliver the final blow. "All ships, target the flagship's main reactor. One shot, that's all we need." The Terra Nova's guns powered up, their energy crackling in anticipation. The ship's weapons were designed for precision, and they had only one target: the heart of the Emperor's Wrath. As the fleet fired, a coordinated volley of laser beams and plasma shots hit the flagship's main reactor. The Emperor's Wrath shook violently as its shields failed, and the reactor core erupted in a brilliant explosion. The flagship, once the pride of the Empire, was now a smoldering wreck, floating helplessly in space. Zarek watched in horror as his flagship disintegrated before his eyes. The Emperor's flagship, the symbol of his empire's power, was now reduced to debris. The battle was over. Empire's collapse. With the destruction of the Emperor's Wrath, the remaining Empire forces began to retreat in disarray. The once unified fleet was now a collection of scattered ships, many of which were too damaged to fight. The human fleet moved in, systematically picking off the remnants of the Empire's forces, ensuring that no threat remained. In the Empire's central command station, panic spread. The Emperor's most trusted advisors scrambled to assess the damage. News of the flagship's destruction had sent shockwaves throughout the Empire, and it was clear that their reign was coming to an end. "Admiral Zarek is dead," one officer reported, his voice trembling. "The fleet has been decimated. The humans, they've won." The Emperor, seated on his throne, slammed his fist against the armrest in frustration. The defeat was complete. The Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for centuries, was falling apart. The Emperor's once unshakable confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate rage. A new beginning for the galaxy. Back on the Terra Nova, Commander Morgan stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the remnants of the battle. The human fleet had emerged victorious, but the price had been high. The galaxy had been forever changed by the conflict, and humanity had proven its strength. "Commander, we've won," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice filled with awe. "The Empire is defeated." Morgan nodded, but there was no celebration. "This isn't just a victory for us. It's a victory for everyone who has suffered under the Empire's rule. We've shown the galaxy that even the strongest empire can fall." But Morgan knew that this was just the beginning. The Empire may have been defeated, but there were still many challenges ahead. New alliances needed to be forged, and the galaxy needed to be rebuilt. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, but it would take time and effort to ensure that peace would last. "We've made our mark," Morgan said quietly, looking out into the vastness of space. "Now we make sure the galaxy stays free." With the fall of the Empire, the galaxy entered a new era, one where humanity would no longer be a silent observer, but a powerful force for peace and justice. The destruction of the Empire marked the beginning of a brighter future, one where humanity would lead the way. The battle was over, but the echoes of its aftermath would reverberate through the galaxy for years to come. The once mighty Galactic Empire, with its vast fleets and cruel reign, lay shattered. The Emperor's wrath, the symbol of their dominance, was now a pile of debris, drifting in the silent void of space. Admiral Zarek, the Empire's last hope, had fallen in battle. The remnants of the Empire's fleet were in full retreat, scattered and leaderless. On the bridge of the Terra Nova, Commander Morgan stood with a cold determination. He had watched the Empire crumble, but there was no celebration, no triumphant cheer. The war was won, but the galaxy still lay in ruins. Now came the harder part, the rebuilding. "Lieutenant Harper," Morgan said, his voice steady but filled with purpose, begin preparing communications with the remaining Imperial forces. We need to know where their strongholds are. We can't let them regroup." Harper nodded, tapping her console. "Yes, Commander. I'm sending the signal now." The human fleet, though victorious, knew that this wasn't a time for complacency. There were still pockets of resistance to deal with, and many worlds that had suffered under the Empire's rule were now vulnerable. Humanity had to prove that it wasn't just powerful, but just, and that the galaxy's future would be built on freedom, not fear. The Emperor's fury back at the heart of the shattered Empire, the Emperor was not yet ready to concede defeat. Deep in his private chambers he sat, his face twisted with rage. The loss of the Emperor's wrath was not just a loss of a ship. It was the loss of his authority, his pride. For the first time in his reign, the Emperor felt the crushing weight of his own vulnerability. "How could this happen?" The Emperor spat, his voice trembling with fury. "How could a mere human fleet defeat the Empire? We have ruled for centuries. How did they find a way to strike so decisively?" His advisors, who had once been confident in their ability to crush any opposition, now stood in silence. No one dared to answer. They knew that the Emperor's anger was as unpredictable as a storm, and no one wanted to be caught in its path. "Prepare the remaining fleet," the Emperor ordered, his voice cold and determined. "We will show these humans that their victory was a fluke. We will bring the full force of the Empire down on them." But deep inside, the Emperor knew the truth. The Empire was not the same as it once was. The defeat of their flagship, the destruction of their fleet, and the loss of their most trusted generals had left them crippled. His forces were scattered, and his power had been shattered. Yet he was determined to rebuild, by any means necessary. A new era for the galaxy on the Terra Nova. Commander Morgan watched as the shattered remnants of the Empire's fleet limped away into the darkness. He had known this moment would come, the moment when humanity would prove that it could stand up to the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But now that it had arrived, the weight of the responsibility was heavy. "Where do we go from here?" "Lieutenant," Harper asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "We've defeated the Empire, but we can't just leave the galaxy in chaos. There are still so many planets that need help." Morgan turned to face her. "You're right. This isn't over. We've won the war, but now we must win the peace. We can't let the power vacuum left by the Empire lead to more violence. We need to rebuild, to unite the galaxy. And we need to make sure the galaxy knows that humanity is not a conqueror, but a protector." Harper nodded, understanding the gravity of Morgan's words. Humanity's victory had been hard-earned, but it was only the beginning of a much longer struggle to bring lasting peace to the galaxy. The rise of new leaders. In the aftermath of the Empire's collapse, many worlds that had been subjugated for centuries began to rise up. The oppressive rule of the Empire had left many species weary and distrustful, but they had also seen the power of unity in action. Humanity had shown them that strength could be wielded with honor and integrity, not just for conquest, but for liberation. One such world was Lorvax, a planet once governed by fear and brutality. The Lorvaxian people had long been subjugated under the Empire's boot, but now with the Empire in ruins, they saw an opportunity for freedom. The leaders of Lorvax sent a diplomatic envoy to meet with Commander Morgan, eager to discuss their future. On Lorvax's capital city, the delegation stood before a large gathering of human and Lorvaxian officials. The air was thick with the tension of both fear and hope. The Lorvaxians were uncertain of what to expect from humanity, having only known the cruelty of the Empire. Morgan stood tall at the podium, his voice firm and resolute. "We did not come here to conquer you. We came to offer you something different. We offer you the freedom to decide your future, to rebuild your world, and to stand side by side with us as we rebuild this galaxy, together." A murmur ran through the crowd, the Lorvaxian leaders exchanging glances. For the first time in a long while, they felt the weight of hope pressing against their hearts. They were not alone anymore. The Lorvaxian leader, an elder woman named Saga, stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. "You offer us a future we thought was lost. We accept your offer, Commander. We will join you, and together, we will build a new galaxy." The path to unity. Humanity's victory was not just about defeating the Empire. It was about proving that the galaxy could be united in peace. The war had destroyed much, but it had also created an opportunity. The opportunity for humanity to show that they were not just powerful, but capable of leadership, capable of being the force for good that the galaxy desperately needed. Across the galaxy, other planets began to make their choices. Some, like Lorvax, embraced humanity's offer of peace and partnership. Others were still cautious, uncertain about the future and what role humanity would play. But the seeds of change were planted, and they would grow. Back on the Terra Nova, Morgan stood by the window, looking out into the vastness of space. The stars seemed endless, and the possibilities were just as infinite. The Empire was gone, but the galaxy had been left broken. It was humanity's job to help heal those wounds. "Commander," Harper said as she approached him, "we've received word from the galaxy. The planets are waiting. They want to know what comes next." Morgan turned to face her. "We show them a new way. We give them the freedom they've been denied for so long. We build a future where no empire can rise again, where all species have the chance to thrive." Harper smiled. "It's going to be a long road." Morgan nodded. but it's one we'll walk together. With the defeat of the Empire, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. Humanity had proven that it could stand against the odds and emerge victorious. But now the true challenge began, the challenge of uniting the galaxy, of forging lasting peace, and of ensuring that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. The galaxy had changed forever. The once invincible empire, which had crushed countless civilizations under its boot, was no more. In its place, a new hope began to rise, one that humanity had promised. No longer would the galaxy suffer under the rule of a tyrannical empire. The question now was, what came next? On Earth, humanity's victory was celebrated with quiet pride. Their fleet had proven their strength, but Morgan, the commander who led them to victory, knew that true leadership was not about power. It was about responsibility. The galaxy was broken, and someone had to step in and help mend it. Commander. Morgan stood at the helm of the Terra Nova, gazing out at the star-filled void. He was a man used to commanding battles, but now he was responsible for something far more difficult, building a new galaxy, one where peace was possible. Lieutenant Harper, update on the situation across the galaxy, Morgan asked, his voice calm yet filled with determination. Harper, now standing at her console, quickly ran through the latest reports. We've established contact with several key planets. Many are eager to discuss the future, but others are hesitant. They're still afraid, Commander. The Empire's influence ran deep. Some worlds are scared that humanity might simply replace the Empire's rule with their own. Morgan nodded. He understood their fear. The galaxy had been under the Empire's thumb for so long that the idea of freedom was both exciting and terrifying. They had no experience with peace, only with war. We need to show them that humanity doesn't seek control, Morgan said thoughtfully. We're here to help, not conquer. They need to see that we are different from the Empire, the first steps toward unity. While the Terra Nova was busy sending diplomatic teams to help rebuild and offer aid to former Imperial subjects, back on Earth, governments and leaders from across the human colonies began to discuss the next steps. With the Empire gone, they had to decide how to proceed. Humanity had been scattered across the stars, each colony independent. But now, there was a need for unity. Commander Morgan and his trusted advisors gathered in the newly established council chambers on Earth. The room was filled with representatives from various human colonies, each one carrying the weight of their own worlds. This council is humanity's first step toward forging something greater than a scattered collection of colonies, Morgan addressed the room. We are here to lead the galaxy, not with an iron fist, but with respect and understanding. Our first priority is to help rebuild the galaxy, to show the galaxy that we can offer them the peace and freedom they've been denied. The room was silent for a moment as the representatives digested Morgan's words. The weight of their decision was clear. There was no turning back now. A galactic alliance, one of the first steps humanity took, was to form a galactic alliance. It wasn't an empire. It wasn't a dictatorship. It was a coalition of planets, species, and races that would work together to rebuild the galaxy. Humanity would lead this alliance, but it would be a democracy. Each world would have a say in the decisions that shaped their future. Commander Morgan, though recognized as the military leader who had crushed the Empire, knew that his role was now one of diplomacy. He could no longer be just a commander. He had to be a symbol of hope, of a new way of living, a new future for all. As representatives from former Imperial planets arrived at Earth's capital, there was a mixture of hope and hesitation in their eyes. The scars of the Empire were deep, and trust would not be easily earned. Still, the first steps were made. The new Galactic Alliance began to take shape. Challenges of rebuilding. The first few months after the Empire's fall were chaotic. While many planets in the Galactic Alliance were eager to rebuild, there were still remnants of the Empire that refused to surrender. Rebel factions, long supported by the Empire, fought to maintain their influence. But the galaxy, now free from the iron grip of the Empire, had something new: hope. Commander Morgan knew that humanity would face challenges in this new era, and they were not prepared to fight any more wars. The Empire was gone, but the damage it had caused still lingered. The real struggle now was not on the battlefield, but in rebuilding, earning trust, and finding common ground with species who had been oppressed for so long. "Harper," Morgan said, as he walked into the command center, his voice thoughtful. "Have we received any updates from the other planets about potential resistance movements?" Harper, always quick to respond, glanced at her screen. "Yes, Commander. A few planets have reported some small pockets of resistance. They've been using the chaos of the Empire's fall to fight for control of certain resources and territories. But we've already sent peacekeepers to negotiate with them. The goal is to prevent more conflict and offer solutions without resorting to violence." Morgan nodded, impressed with how quickly things were progressing. The human fleet had been trained for war, but they were learning diplomacy and peacekeeping in real time. It wasn't easy, and mistakes were bound to happen. But the goal was clear. They had to ensure the galaxy was rebuilt on the foundation of peace. The first true test. The first true test came when a group of rogue warlords, former commanders under the Empire, refused to join the Galactic Alliance. These warlords controlled several key systems, and their desire for power threatened to spark a new conflict. They had no intention of yielding to the idea of peace, preferring to maintain their control over the people they ruled. One of these warlords, a brutal leader named Commander Varric, sent a message to Commander Morgan defying the terms of the new alliance. "You think you've won, human?" Varric's voice crackled through the communication system. "I control worlds, resources, fleets. I am the true ruler of the galaxy, and I will not bow to you or anyone else. You will learn that the galaxy cannot be tamed so easily." Morgan, standing on the bridge of the Terra Nova, stared at the screen for a moment. He had been expecting this. There would always be those who refused to give up power. But humanity had shown its strength, and now it was time to show its resolve. "Lieutenant Harper, prepare the fleet," Morgan ordered. "But this will not be a battle. We will offer them one last chance for peace. If they refuse, we will take the necessary action to protect the future of the galaxy." A moment of decision. The fleet moved toward the rogue warlord's stronghold, but Commander Morgan knew that this was not just a military operation. This was about the galaxy's future. If humanity's leadership was to have any legitimacy, it had to be shown not only through strength but also through wisdom and restraint. Morgan broadcast a message to the people of the system controlled by Varric. "I am Commander Morgan of Earth and the Galactic Alliance. You have been under the rule of the Empire for too long. It's time for you to decide whether you want peace or continue down the path of destruction." He waited, letting the silence stretch between the message and the response. The future of the galaxy was in their hands. Varric's decision would set the tone for the next chapter in this new era. As the fleet approached, tensions ran high. The galaxy stood on the edge of something new, something that could either bring them together or tear them apart. Humanity had proven it could conquer, but now it had to prove it could lead with justice, kindness, and wisdom. The stakes were higher than ever before.